Welcome to part 7, where we finally get in now and get to do our texturing in Substance Painter. So we'll just start off. I'm just going to go do a quick sort of an explanation or an overview of how the system sort of works here. There's a couple of things. I've been playing around with Painter now the last couple of days, and I have to say it's very easy to pick up. Once you get a few basic sort of concepts into your head, it's very quick. I picked it up very quickly. Um, and if you're used to texturing in Photoshop or using layers and groups and that in Photoshop, you know you're going to pick up on it fairly quickly as well. It's just if you're used to shading and creating materials in whatever Maya Max or wherever, there's a few things that are different you have to bear in mind. The main thing is here we're painting across all of our channels at once. You have the option to disable certain channels so you can have a material or a layer even that's just painting bump or just painting roughness, or metallic, or just your base color. So with the PBR here, as I just explained in the last video, with base color, height, roughness and metallic. So you know the base color and the metallic and the roughness, they all kind of, because they all go in together here, they're all combined. So I'll explain it a bit better now when I show the materials. Your height map is your normal map that you have applied, plus when you export it, it's gonna, any additional detail painted in your height channel is going to be added into your normal map, and you'll always have your original normal map, and then the one you bake out at the end of the one you export out at the end of your texturing process will be the original, plus whatever details you added through the height channel here. So up here we have our layers. As we if anyone didn't watch the last video, at the end of the last video I gave a kind of a brief overview of the UI here, and the various tabs and sections here, and where to find different things, so you can check back and have a look at that if you're unsure here what I'm doing, or just to get this. Wes McDermott has plenty of very good videos on Painter there, to get up to speed on it. There was one particular video of his I watched, I think from GDC 15. It was an hour and a half long. It was a presentation he did, and I pretty much got it by watching that video. That was the main video for me that you know, got some of these concepts into my head. So I'd advise watching that video. So up the top of the layers here, you'll see we have a little drop down where we can change between our channels. So most of the time you'll stay on base color, but you might jump when you switch to these other channels. It's going to update accordingly the thumbnails in your layers to show these different channels. So you'll see that in a minute. So I'm just going to create a layer here. We have basically we have just this, the plus sign is just to add a layer. So you'd add a paint layer, and you see now at the moment that means I can't do anything in the viewport. So the navigation is, I know I'm jumping around a bit here, but this is more about just the texture. But I'll just a few basics just to, you know, get you used to it and get you in there so you can follow along in this lesson. Navigation is similar to nearly all other programs. You just hold down Alt, and left mouse button is to orbit around, middle mouse button is to pan, and the right mouse button is to zoom in and out, or you can use your scroll wheel in your mouse if you have one. And also yeah, that's pretty much you can also, as you're orbiting, you can, just like ZBrush, you can hold shift and snap to up down, you know, top bottom. Now it's still, it's not going to snap to an orthographic view. It's still, you can see here the perspective, it's still snapping to perspective, but it's still a very handy feature to have there. And if you jump over to 2D 3D view, it's the same navigation in the UV. So left will rotate. So you might say, well, why don't I want my UVs to rotate? Well, you know, if you're drawing on a piece of paper or something, you might turn it to the side depending on what angle suits you for drawing a particular stroke. and then we can do the same there. We can snap with the shift middle mouse button and right mouse button on the wheel. It's the same. And the lighting, in case you're wondering why it looks so weird here, the lighting is actually being projected into the UV view as well. But you can change your you can cycle through your channels here in the preview window. So if you're not happy with that, you can cycle into it when you're painting on your UVs. You can cycle into your base color map. So there's nothing on these, so they're showing up as transparent. I'm pressing C to cycle through my channels. So these are all showing up as transparent because there's nothing on them yet. There's no layers up here, so it's essentially just transparent. So you can see there's base color, height, roughness, metallic, and you can just keep pressing C and then press M to go back to your material, and you can obviously see up here, you know, and then M back to the material. Okay, so that's that out of the way, and we'll go back to 3D view here, and I'm going to create a layer. So I'm going to create a fill layer. So when we create a fill layer and now press C, you can see these are our default channels. So it's not a metallic material. You can see down here metallic is set to black, which means it's off. So that would be full. You know, it would be, this is basically going from dielectric kind of or sorry, non-metal. It's going from non-metal to fully metal. So there's nothing in that channel at the moment, so it's black. The base color is white, as you can see down here. Base color, not quite white, but just off white. The height, we've no height information, and the roughness, that's the default. You can see the roughness here is set to 0.3, so that's why it's a kind of a grey, you know. So if we slide these are just base values, uniform kind of base values. You can add maps into all these, and we'll show that later on. So press M to go back to material, and we've our fill layer added here. And first thing I like to do is up here you have a group. So you can see here you can't actually paint on a fill layer. So if you want to paint on a layer, you add a layer, a paint layer, and now you can see the paintbrush becomes available. And I'll just go to brush. Yeah, color. These are the different channels. You can turn them on and off here in the material. So roughness is enabled at the moment. So you can see there, I'm painting on it and nothing's happening. But then when you go in closer, you can see I've actually painted based on this roughness slider, which is black, so the roughness is off, so it's a 100% reflective, mirror-like reflection. So if I bring this up to white and start painting again, you can see there, I don't know if you can see in the video, but it's painting that away, and it's completely rough now. And I can turn on these other channels. So if I turn color on, just say set it to white, that'll be our base color, or sorry, red. Now it's painting. Color, so that's just one of the main things to get used to is if sometimes you're painting, you're saying what's going on, there's nothing coming, you just make sure to check these the different channels are on and off. So I'm just going to click that layer, delete that layer, go back to our fill layer, and now we'll come down to some of the show some of these materials here so we can get a better idea what's going on. So as I've showed already, you see here it says substance, so you could put a substance in here, you can select it here, or you can drag it from here in the materials tab. So you know, I'll just grab any of these here, stress plastic, and I can drag that in, and then you see the bars, and then it comes up, and this is one of Pavel's materials. So here's all the parameters here, and you can see it's meant to mimic you know, a plastic based on these maps. And this is something as well, these maps, any of these effects and the substances and the generators and everything, they're all you can use it. All these maps are so this is the ambient occlusion and the curvature, so basically the recessed areas where AO is, and also the curvature map, which is the edges. So you can see here the edges are being affected, and also the areas where there might be AO in here, in the recesses and around here. So we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves there. So I can just X this to knock that back off again. So these are our base values, as I said, and on this fill layer by default these are all set to on, all the channels are set to on. So we have a base color, or we could use any of these maps here. You can use any map as procedurals. You can import tile textures, so we could use that as a base if we wanted to, or a substance, or a texture, or grunge map, procedural, or a bitmap. So it's completely flexible. There's a huge amount of options here, and I'm really enjoying using it. It's an excellent software, I have to say. It really is. And here's, as I say, our roughness and metallic. So what I'm going to do is come down here. These are all from the last video I showed. These are all these all ship with Painter. You'll have all these as well. So I'm going to just select this one here, metal steel, bumped, and you'll see the progress bar loading up. And depending on what you have set here, I have 2K. You can go between any of these while you're working. Now these maps, the ones that you imported, are baked out at a certain resolution, will stay in that resolution, but you can jump up and down through these and paint at a lower resolution, and then export. You could paint at 512 and export at 4K. But depending on, it's all GPU based, so depending on your graphics card, you might want to drop that down. But I'm going to just stick on the 248, and obviously the more layers you have, the more it's going to slow down. But it doesn't really slow down at all. So here's our basic. This is one of these material presets here, and if we come over to we see as well by default it's the same here as the white one we had. We just added this steel bumped in here, and that releases all these settings to us, presents us with all these different settings, so we can change all these to change around the look of our material. And now if I press C, you can see now our roughness, our metallic. So it's fully white, which means it's metal. It's completely metal, because it's obviously metal steel is the material. But this area here where it's grayscale is some of the dirt and grime. So in your metallic map, that will still have reflection, but obviously not as strong as the clean metal, because it's a layer of dirt or grime over the top of the metal. So for instance, come down here and we can bump up the dirt, and it's showing up in our metallic layer there. Obviously is more dirt. There's our base color. So the base color and the metallic is tied in. So because this is metal, metal doesn't really have a diffuse color. It's the reflection that's kind of, your eye perceives that reflection as a particular color. So the metallic and the albedo, or the base color, combine to kind of give us the final look of the shader. But I'm not going to even attempt to try and explain it properly. But as I mentioned in the last video, if you go to Marmoset, the makers of Toolbag, if you go to their website, there's a great article on this PBR as relates to kind of these game shaders. Eventually now I'd say this method of shading is gonna supersede the older kind of models in some of the traditional renders. So, or at least shaders will be added into all the renders that are working off this metallic and albedo combination, and roughness as well, of course. So there's a bump, and we'll just go back to the material, and you can see here you can play around with these settings. So there's some dirt I added, and we can add in some more scratches, and you can just play around there. So here's our color. So that is essentially not really think of it as a color, but as the reflection the reflection color. So you know, you might have gold, copper, brass, bronze, chrome, all these different metals, and they all reflect differently. And certain metals, as I meant, like gold, copper, bronze, will have they will have color in that reflection. So you know, you could I'll just you know, bring it down to sort of to a goldy kind of a color. Maybe take some saturation out, and you can get a kind of a gold look there. So I'll just bring that back to grey. And another thing with this PBR, your values here, you can see from 0 to 1, but because a lot of this stuff is targeted in a game engine, or just in general, I suppose, you don't want to have your colours too much value pushed to either end of the scale. So you might think of it as sort of keeping it between maybe 0.2 and 0.8, or just slightly below 0.2 and slightly above 0.8, so that you're never getting pure white or pure black. Because pure black, if the asset is shaded in a game engine, if something is pure black, well then you know, it's going to look strange with the shadowing in the game engine. And the same with white. If it's pure white and then it gets lit, it's getting multiplied by the light, and it'll just blow out. And the same is with saturation. If it's too saturated, and it might be, say, if it's red and it's under a red light in the game, well then it's going to blow it out as well, and oversaturate it and multiply it. So just something to bear in mind as well. You know, you can stay in between, which are colours. You can stay in between 0.2 and 0.8, or just slightly above and slightly below with value and saturation. So that's that. You know, we could bump up the AO here. The height range is for the bump. So I can bring that up. Bring it right down. You can see it there, popping in the viewport. So I'll just leave it there at 0.5. Height position, height range, air spreading, saturation. These are all sort of things, you know, you just want to play around with. Just play around with them till you find the look that you want. Contrast, luminosity, these are all sort of self-explanatory. See, it's just a random sort of generator. You can just generate, obviously, because it's tiling and procedural, it's just generating a mathematical kind of a random seed. Here are your channels and what they're mapped to. Generally just leave them all as they are. Here's our substance, here's our channels here, all turned on. So I could turn off colour, and now you can see that that's our metallic. So we've nothing that's transparent again. So you're saying, well, if I turn off the colour, how come this still? And that's because what I was saying earlier on, this is the reflectivity of the metal. So I'll turn that back on. And these are your you can change around your UV setting. So at the moment it's based on our UVs. We can change this to, this was just added I think in 1.3, and I was delighted to because before I started I was looking into Painter, would I get into it, or would I try and learn it, or would I use it, and that was one of the main things for me. I was wondering if they had triplanar projection, and they do. So basically it's a form of blended mapping. So you know, if I turn it on there, it's projecting from say X, Y and Z, and then it's 3 different planar projections. So say if you box mapped something and you were projecting from these 6 directions, well, at the corner here, it's not gonna, it's just gonna there's going to be a harsh kind of there's no transition there. It'll just be a harsh switch from one plane to the next. But triplanar projection, it's blending it all so that you don't see those seams that you would see with box mapping. So you can play around with that depending on how your UVs are set up, and you know, you could get a better result than your UVs. So you can play around with that. I'm just going to leave it on UVs for the moment. And then our UV, these are all tiling textures, remember, and if you import any tiling textures, the same thing. You can just, or you could even import them not tiling and paint out your seams, but it would be a lot quicker to just tile them in Photoshop if you're bringing in your own bitmaps. So you want to just lock this U and V, and then we can tile it, and you can see there it's tiling the whole material rather than just a texture. So everything's tiling together, and you can see like the crazy the bump is fairly pronounced. So if you are some of these substances in this one, here's the height here, we can drop the height, but in some of these I was a bit confused because they didn't have a setting to raise or lower the bump strength. So what you can do, if that's ever the case, you can just come up to here and switch down to the height channel, and you see that'll change to a grayscale, and you can just come in here like Photoshop and just drop the opacity of the layer right down. So that's just another option you have there. So I'll go back to base color, and I'm going to just drop this, maybe drop the height down slightly, and if I turn off the height channel, you can still see that you know, when we did the sculpting over in ZBrush, I used the H polish brush to kind of ding up the surface slightly, so you know that gave us a good head start. And like a lot of this, what I did over in ZBrush, as I mentioned as well, I did put some detail on it, but I said we were going to add more of that detail in Painter, so you could even just you could skip the sculpting stage altogether and just build in your 3D package, or even in ZBrush just build your low poly mesh, subdivide it, and then just bake your normal map over here and just paint all these scratches and everything with it. You could even probably make one of these weld brushes in here. The only thing is now the trim dynamic brush in the corners, you wouldn't really be able to. Well, I'm sure, yeah, you would, of course you would. Yeah, you could make any kind of brushes here, and remember you're painting across all your channels at the same time, so you could skip that ZBrush stage altogether. But where would be the fun in that, eh? So we'll turn that height back on, and that's, I think I've pretty much gone over the basics of the material here. And one other thing we'll do is I'll go over the basics of the brushes. So we'll just add another layer. So I'm just going to call this if I can type properly, I'm just going to call this base metal. And a good habit to get into is, say if we're going to have a base metal here, then we're going to have maybe a kind of a multi-layered paint material over the top of that, and we'll be scratching away that to reveal the metal. So if you're used to Photoshop and masking layers, masking groups, you'll see the groups here. You want to get into the habit of using these groups. They're quite essential in the group folder. So we'll just call this metal, and then we'll drag and drop our base metal in here, and now that's in that group. So you can add masks to layers above layers that are obviously below them, but then you can also add a group mask, and you know, you could mask out the entire group. So say if we paint material here on top of this metal that was 3 layers, you don't want to be masking through all of them, so you can just mask the group all together to reveal that metal underneath. So yeah, that's I'm just going to add this layer real quick just to show a few features of the paintbrush. So when we add that paint layer, you can see all this becomes available, the properties of the paint. So it's all handy, it's all to hand here, and you can see now at the moment with the paint, this color and roughness are enabled, and metallic and height are disabled. So you could paint just with this color here and your paintbrush, or else if you wanted it, we can also paint with materials. So for instance, if I just you know, I could activate metal there as well, metallic, and paint. And I think the metallic is set to, the roughness is it's set to fully rough, so you can see here in the material preview it's completely diffused. And you can also see that our metal color here is black. Our metal is black, sorry. So now, sorry, yeah, that's the material there. Is there's no metallic on this layer because I haven't painted any yet. So now you can see there's a reflection, and if I move the light, we're painting with metal as well as color, and then the roughness. But I've the roughness set here, so I can still change this roughness, and then paint again, and we're painting with roughness and paint here. So just yeah, bear that in mind. Hang on a sec. If I come down here and the metallic is black here, we can set the metallic there to white, fully white, and then the roughness is at white, so we could bring that up, and now it'll be sort of a glossy kind of reflection rather than a mirror-like reflection. And I'll just press shift and move our light. I'll even change the brush so you can see this a bit better. And we'll just change this roughness setting. And you can see there now, I'll move the light again, where we have a variance in the roughness. So I'll just undo that, and sorry, I'll just add that layer back in again, and we can turn everything on here, and our height is black, so our height's in the middle here, so that's there's going to be no bump painted on it. So now I know this, it's nearly a half an hour I'm talking about this stuff, but this is the this is the meat and potatoes of working in Painter. Just this is the kind of stuff that I needed to, once I got my head around all this stuff here that I'm talking about. It's pretty easy then. This is the backbone of what you'll be doing. So so to avoid frustration, it's important to just understand the stuff here. I might be kind of explained a bit haphazardly, I hope not, but I'll soldier on. So if I change the height now, you know, you can see here we're going to go positive and negative, so we're going to either come out of the surface or go into the surface. So if I paint here, we have our dirt brush on and it's painting bump here. If we go positive, it's going to bring it out there, so you can see that one's gone in and that one's coming out. So I'll just undo them. So that's the basics of those, how they work together, you know. So we're fully metallic and we have some roughness, and also you can use your Wacom tablet, and the brushes, as you'll see in a minute, are pressure sensitive, but I'm just using the mouse at the moment. So the parentheses open and close are just the same as Photoshop to increase or decrease your brush. So we're painting bump here, metallic, fully metallic, and roughness, all in one. And see the way it's rotating weird here. If you just wherever you put your cursor, it'll localize around that spot there, just in case you're getting weird sort of rotation like this. Just, you know, it's a really easy navigation system, user friendly. So I'll just undo that again, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to set that back to 0, and we'll bring our roughness. Well, I'll just leave the roughness there, and I'll put metallic back to black, and I'll leave the color at red. I'll just bring it to white maybe, even though I said don't do pure white earlier on. This is just for demonstrations here. Right, so you can click on these here as well, and they're all accessible here. you can drag and drop everything. So if I just click on brush, here's all the brush settings, and you can see this is the alpha we're using. So these are just presets of brushes, but you can also come over here to the alpha palette or tab and, you know, add your own. I've added some of my own in here. So the likes of this one here, cloudy, these are just ones that I made myself. Now some of these are, I took them from a Mari. There's a Mari brush there, Storm Cloud I think it is, and that's it there. I just took the brush tip thumbnails from the Mari folders and just made them as 512 square. You want all your textures that you import into Painter to be square, or else I've tried to import ones that weren't square and it just crashed instantly, so just make sure they're square. So yeah, that's some of the ones I made here. And then these are a couple of the Mari ones. It was just to test them out. There was some brushes I liked in Mari, and I just wanted to test them out in here. And then there's this one here, a hard chip. That was just I think one of the Mari brushes, but then I painted over it myself just to change it up. So I wanted a completely hard edge kind of paint chip brush, because there was nothing, I didn't find that in here suitable. And this is just a stencil that I made in Photoshop just for the purposes of this. I got a bit carried away. I only needed one or two signs, but I got a bit carried away and just decided to make a 4K stencil. You know, for future projects, and there's a bit of space left, I can add some more stuff in, so I'll show a bit of stenciling later on as well. Right, so back to the brush here. These are all the settings. So you have size, this is your pressure sensitivity. You pen pressures on, but I'm using my mouse at the moment. The Wacom's there beside me, but I'm just using the mouse for doing this. So there's your size slider. Your flow is just like your opacity. And one thing I've noticed with this, you know, if I paint with full flow, and then if I bring it down halfway, you know, there's not really much difference. It still looks like it's full. So I found that you have to bring this right down. You just have to bring that kind of right down, or even if I bring it up to 9 there, it's quite strong. So just bear that in mind. We'll bring that back up to 100. And spacing there, you have your little scratch pad the same as you have in Mari or Photoshop, and you know you can paint in that as well, just to test out your brushes. Size, jitter, these are all things that you know you're gonna know. I'll just bring the size down. You're gonna know from Photoshop. Angle jitter, you're not really gonna see on this position. So yeah, these are all you know, things to play around with. And as I said, you can change these. This is the brush preset here, but if you want, you can just choose any of your stencils, any of your alpha, sorry, that you have over in the alpha tab, or else you can just grab them, drag them across and drop them. You see a little plus sign. So yeah, that's pen pressure. All the rest you can change the angle. If you come down on down, shape, these are just different kind of shapes. I haven't really messed around with that much. Hardness, so obviously how hard or soft your brush is. The size ratio, random, and then this is for stencils. Here you can see this little X if something isn't so if I turn off height, you can see it gets X'd out. So any of these that are disabled are going to be just X'd. And there's stencil there, so we could say for instance I could drag the stencil in here and start painting with that. And you're probably wondering why it's grayscale, because if I want to use that stencil, I have to up here, the third one in. So the hotkeys are 1, 2, 3, paint, eraser, stencil. So 3 is stencil, and the screen will go kind of grey. And then you can start painting with your stencil there. But I'm just going to continue on with the brush again. So I'll select the brush here. No stencil, no, it's still in there. So I'll just go with the brush again. and come on down, stencil material, and then we're back down to our material again. So our brush has just kind of popped in. And if you're getting if you're only seeing some of your settings here and you're wondering where the rest of them are, just make sure you have brush advanced tab open there, and all those settings will become available. So that's the basics of the brush, and then we have our alpha. The two of them are tied in together, and stencil. So I don't know why that's that should be. And there you can see if you right click, you can save your brush material or your tool. If you change all these settings and you have a certain alpha and all the rest, and you're happy with the brush and you don't want to keep making it every time, you can just save it, and then it'll pop in over here. Right, that is pretty much the brushes. So we'll just grab that layer, and yeah, I'll just show a few of the, here's a few of the the presets or the brushes. There's a few of them there to mess around with, and something like scratches here would already be set up here, so it has a size jitter, the angle jitters all the way up. So that's the thing with the presets, they're obviously already set up in the way that I just mentioned if you wanted to save yours out, so you don't have to keep doing it every time. Whereas if you just come to brush and say select the default brush, everything's defaulted there, so none of the settings have been changed as they will have been with the other presets. Yeah, so with all that with all that said, we're going to just go on with texturing there. But as I say, that's all important stuff that you need to know to avoid frustration. So I'll just delete that layer, and so we've our base metal within the metal group, and now let's say for instance we want to we want to change the reflectivity, but all we have down here is a slider, so it's completely rough and it's completely chrome like. So rather than just use this, what we can do is add a layer, not a fill layer now, just a normal layer, and we can come down here and turn off. We can just turn off color, height, and metal. So all we're doing here is adding this layer. So we just call this rough. So this layer is just going to modulate and break up the reflection a bit more, rather than just relying on this uniform sort of grayscale value to drive the glossiness of the reflection, or sorry, the roughness of the reflection. We're going to add in a rough layer here, and you can see from base color you can switch down to roughness, and so we'll add that rough layer. And then the next thing is, you're going to be using these a lot, the generators, and then these different effects, layer effects, so you can stack these on layers. So these will be stacked within layers, so you can build up your own effects using the combination of these. And then the generators, of course, are the main sort of tools for masking and everything. So it all works great in combination, and even though it seems like it's only a couple of tools, there's a huge amount of variation that can be achieved just with these few tools. So we'll add a fill layer, and sorry, we're going to set these off and just leave roughness on, same as we have here if we wanted to paint, because we can still paint on this layer here, because it's not a fill layer, it's just a paint layer. So we come down to the fill, and if you come down to roughness, we can select one of these grunge, maybe one of these grunge maps here, and you can see now if I press C and go into the roughness, it's crazy. Yeah, this grunge map is that's crazy, and I'm going to change that. But this is just so you can kind of see what it's done there. If I go back to material, it's masking out the reflectivity, so you can still see it's almost nearly chrome like in here, and then it's completely rough here. So we're going to change that grunge map for let me see, I don't know what, sometimes that happens where they're only available. I think it might be some sort of bug, and then when you X off that, it resets again and you have to turn these off. So I think it might be some sort of bug, so you just have to do it again. Or maybe I'm just stupid. Right, let me see, what one do I want here? Grunge map. They're all a bit too extreme. Let me just go with, it's a bit too soft. Yeah, maybe one of these black and white spots. It's more like it. Right, so we have our roughness set here. We're in our roughness channel here, and you know, we can still mess with the opacity of the layer here, remember. And then we also have blend modes that you can mess around with. So these is a huge amount of blend modes. Right, so one of the other things we might want to do now is tile it a bit more. You know, if the detail is if we go over here to 2D view, and I'll just press C and go into the base color and kind of zoom in. You can see here the resolution is a bit blurry. I know we're zoomed right in here and it's only 2K, but let me see, why isn't it tiling? Oh, sorry. No, that should be. I don't know why that's not tiling, or it's not updating. Let me see. I'll just go back to yeah, it wasn't updating there when I was in the channel, so maybe that's a little bit of a bug there as well. Not to worry. You can still see here what I'm getting at, so I can tile it here, and obviously I did expect the resolution is going to increase because the map is being tiled. Right, now with that done there, we can see now that's giving us a kind of a nice effect on breaking up the reflection. Another thing then we can do is to utilize this effects stack within the layer, is we can add a levels, and don't forget to change this to roughness, because that's the channel that we're targeting with this layer. And then you can just mess around here with your levels and you know, crunch those blacks and whites whatever way you like. Now I'm not going to leave it like that because it looks shite, but so if I leave them spaced out now, you can see if I go that way, more of the roughness is coming through. If I go that way, more of the reflectivity is coming through. And you can also invert this, and it's just going to kind of go the other way. So you might want to crunch this in. Sorry, crush. I keep saying crunch. And this just adds, this levels here adds a nice extra bit of control here for what we're doing. And I might just bring the opacity of that maybe down a bit, and bring a bit less of that, a bit less of the roughness in. I also might come back down to the base metal, and maybe just take a little touch of the reflection out of that. And like the great thing is here, you know, I don't have to get this 100% right and keep having to do test renders and change it, tweak it, do test render, change it, tweak it. I can just see it all here in real time and change the lighting around and everything, and just say, yeah, that's, I'm happy with that, and then I can come back to it later on, and when I've the rest of the material's done, I can come back to it then, and so, you know, you can move on then and always come back to it, just a little bit of tweaking. Okay, so that's let's say that is, I might just, sorry, I might just do a little bit more tweaking here and take some of that roughness out. There was too much on it. But see, all it did there was pull the slider a tiny bit to the left, and it definitely improved it, in my book anyway. Okay, right, so let's say that's a metal done, so we can close down that group, and now we create a new group, and it does that as well. It just creates your group, so you want to just drag it out and close that down again and drag that to the top. What are you doing? Just drag it to the top, and we'll call this one paint, and now we'll add a fill there, and we're going to drag that fill there into our paint group, and it's grey at the moment. So what we could do is we could there's a couple of presets here. There's painted steel, or this plastic base. So the plastic works well for a lot of materials, because if something isn't metal, then it's dielectric, so you'd have an average of 4% reflectivity or whatever it is, and sort of sciencey terms, but basically you can start a lot of materials just with that, with the plastic, or even this white one here, and just work up from that with your settings and maps and all the rest of it. But if you just want a quick base to start at, with different substance settings in them, some of these can be good to use. So I'll probably just pick this painted steel for this layer, and you know, I just want to make sure that you switch back to base color, so just in case you're wondering why that they were all grey. Right, so we'll choose that, and then I might maybe pick kind of a red, and then the great thing is we can always change this later on, and the steel. I'll show you how quick it can be to do that later on. So you can see as well that this is painted steel. If you just have a look at some of the settings here, the scratches and rust we can add in. Here's our base roughness, and I've seen the paint color. So we could add some rust in. We could add some scratches. I'm just cranking these up so you can kind of see what's going on. So there's the scratches there, and as you can see, like, these are color, height, rough and metal are all being painted at the same time, so we're getting our you know, our color bump. The whole lot is getting painted in as we choose. So I'm going to take off the rust and the scratches. We can add some of that in later on. I don't want to add it in from this substance, so we'll just take them off there. And for this paint here, I want to kind of, there's a material here you could sort of use for that. That's the Pavel one, like Chowski, that created these ones here that I mentioned in the last video. Where is it? Stressed plastic. This one here, stressed plastic. Or you could just build it up yourself here. I'm just going to get a variation. Basically, what I can do is right click and duplicate that layer, and we're just going to call this, paint paint base, and we just call this one paint dirty or whatever, and then we come into that one and we can just change the color of that and maybe make it a bit darker, and maybe give it a bit more, a bit less roughness, one or the other. And then we can add our right click, add a white mask, click here, add a generator, and then we could either add a generator and choose one of these dirt level. You can see here that's acting as a mask, that generator, but I don't want to use that. I want to add a fill there in our layer stack here and choose a grayscale, and then come down and choose one of these grunge maps. So let me see, I'll try that one there. And try a different one, a bit more contrasted. Right now you can see that it's masking between these two layers and just creating some variation. So you can you know, try around a couple of them. The more contrasted the map, the more obvious it's going to be. But we can add a levels on top of this to get more control over that even, you know. So don't just rely on the map. Yeah, so we might no, I think I'd rather a broader sort of like that one that we had, a kind of a broader breakup, and then I'll add the levels in, and we'll crunch those levels in. Sorry, I keep saying crunch. We'll crush the levels just to give us that bit of variation in the paint. Right, and then another thing we could do is, you know, if you wanted to, you could just add a fill there, and we could go over here to our textures and just drag in our ambient occlusion, and then set that to multiply, and the same as you do in Photoshop, and then you can kind of bring out your AO a bit more. I'm going to leave that off for the moment, but it's just another kind of a thing you could do. So I'll take that out, and let's say we have that's our paint variation. And now what we want to do is we want to chip the paint away to reveal our base metal. So I'll select this paint, and we're going to add sorry, I'm going to have to add a mask, add a white mask, right click, add a white mask, and add a color selector, color selection. And now you can see automatically our ID mask is placed in here, and we just come down here to pick color, and then here's our mask, obviously previewed in the viewport. And sorry, I keep forgetting you can't zoom in, so I'll go to do that again, pick color, and then just pick that blue, and now we can see it's masked out. So here's our mask that we've added into the group. So these two are in the paint group, and then our mask is at the group level using a color selection based on our ID mask, pick color, and that's our blue. So that's why we baked that out, because you know these weren't part of the geometry. So you'll see the next bit of masking I'm going to do now. There's another trick to masking, another tool here, this UV, or so sorry, this it's called geometry decal, but it's actually for selecting different components based on whatever faces, verts, and UV islands. Right, so it's masked that out for us there, so that's why we went to the trouble of baking that out. We could have went around and painted all these out by hand if we wanted it, but you know, it's a bit of a pain, because you know, all of our metal here, that you know, the screws, this and the nuts, so it's a nice quick way to mask them out. And then what else we can do now is we can come back into this mask, and with this tool here that I was talking about, you click that, it'll bring you over here, and we have verts, you know, so we can select verts, and you can see here, because I'm in the mask, it's masking out what I've selected. So we verts, edges and faces, but we're going to be using UV. Now this is a really great tool based on our UV shells. We can just click, and because we're painting with black and we added a white mask, you know, I could change that back to white and add it back in. So as I said from earlier on, if you're used to Photoshop and masking, all this stuff should be a piece of piss. So we'll go around and select our various elements here that we want to keep as metal. So you can see there now, that was a handy little trick to do there. We're using a combination of our UV masking and our material ID map masking to get what we wanted. So that is you know, the basics of the kind of paint group done, and we can just switch back over to the brush. And now what we want to do is we want to mask out the paint, chip away the paint to reveal the metal on the corners or wherever we want it. So we're going to use I'm just going to come up here at a generator, and we're going to use we can start with this one here. These are all the presets. You can just play around with them yourself. These are all presets, and then we have the mask builder, which is quite powerful. You have a lot more options with that, but these ones, some nice ones here as well. This dort one here, and this metal edge wear. So by default it comes in like that, and if you just invert it, it's need to create another group and just call that paint vary, and then if we select these two and drop them in there, and now we want to drop that back on top again. Sorry, now it's getting a bit messy. Sorry. Bring these in here, close that group, and then we want to bring this into this group. And now in this paint vary, we're going to add another mask. So add white mask, and back to UV, and just mask them out again. So yeah, that was what I was talking about earlier as well, about you know, the whole Photoshop thing where you're nesting groups and groups and masking based on the groups. It's to get the likes of this, where we're able to use essentially 3 different masks: our matte ID color selection mask, our manual UV selection mask, and then our procedural edge wear mask. So we use the 2 groups then, with one group nested in the other group. So that's pretty much, you know, we can come in here to metal edge wear, and you know, these are all the different, you can see here, image inputs. It's using the curvature map and the AO map to drive this. So if you notice here, because this was masked on UVs, we have a harsh kind of a line here that doesn't look great at all, to say the least. So what I would do here is open that group again, come into the paint vary mask, brushes, sorry, not brushes, yeah, I'll just select the default brush there selected, and default brush is selected, and I'm just going to select the alpha that I made myself that I was talking about, the chipped paint alpha, and then I'm going to use that to chip the corners away. But as it is kind of at the moment, you know, well, it's not too bad actually. You could set the spacing up, and maybe set the, I want to leave the flow at 100 because it's hard chip and brush. So I'd also like to bring the angle up a fair bit just to vary that, and also the size jir, and bring the angle jir up more. And now we can just sort of bring it down smaller, and just chip away those bit of manual painting here, and you can just chip away some of that unnatural sort of line there. And there's another function here in the brushes. Where is it gone? Alignment. So you can set that to UV, and then you can start painting, and it'll respect the UVs. It'll cross over them if you move your brush across it, but you can go up close to it, and you can see there I'm trying to paint, and it's not letting me paint on this next view UV over. So it's another handy little tool. Or you could paint in your 2D view. So say you wanted to, rather than masking that stuff out earlier on, we could have just come into the UV view, and we know that these are all the sections that are going to be metal, so we could have just painted over all them. So these are all just extra options and handy little things to know. So back to what I was doing, and I know this video is going on a bit long, but I thought it was important to cover some of this stuff, you know. So I'll pause the video and go around and do the rest of that. So you saw what I was doing there, just using my little custom chip brush. And then if you wanted it, you could come in here to color, change that to white because we're on a mask, and paint some of that back in, if you know, rather than using the eraser, the rubber up here. You could use that, but you're obviously going to lose that information, so better off to use masks, non-destructive. So I'm going to pause that, and I'll come around and I'll paint up that right, so I've painted a bit more of that, chipped a bit more of that out, and that's kind of the basics and most of the main sort of tools you're going to be using. So another thing we might want to do here is I can show some of the particle effects here. So what we're going to do is come up to the very top of the paint layer, and I'm just going to add another layer on top of everything, a paint layer, sorry, on top of everything here, and we just call this leaks, and we can use this heavy leaking heavy leaking brush or particle effect. And let me see, it's still set to roughness there, so I want to come down here and put color on as well, and maybe change it to a kind of a brown, sort of a browny color. Just desaturate it and darken it up a bit, and now we can fire a few particles. You can see now the effect it's having there. So I'm going to do that and change the color, maybe make it not as dark. Yeah, something maybe, or maybe a bit add a bit more red into it. As if the you know, the kind of red pigment from the paint or something. So the reason I added this on the top of everything was so I can paint over the whole lot rather than it would have been respected by the masks, and it would have been masked. So I just add it on the very top. So you can change your settings here. I'll just go into the particle brush here, and the same as, you know, you can change your size of flow jitter and whatever. But these settings down here be the kind of main ones where you can change. You can have wind, you can raise up your gravity. So if I raise that right up, you can see it's falling at a much faster rate. So I'll bring that down a bit, and this is something you can just come in and play with all these, play with these settings here. You can turn up the factor here. You can see the spawn rate factor. It's much heavier now because it's spawning more particles. So I'll turn that back down again. So yeah, that's the best thing to do, is just play around yourself. And then let's do a bit more here, and maybe some here. Be perfect place for it. And you can see the way it's falling across the geometry there. So I might even come over to my brush and sorry, change over to a brush and just lower the draw size, and maybe choose a dirt, or maybe just stick with that just to fill in that area there underneath the pipe. And I might just get the rubber here and rub some of this out here. I could even get your dirt brush then and just click about. Maybe drop down the flow. If you're using your Wacom tablet, obviously you don't have to keep doing this. You can just put pen pressure on, and I'll bring that right down, and just take some of that back out. And same down here, we could just rub over that. Now I'm using the rubber here, but if you wanted it, as I said, use a mask instead for more of a non-destructive kind of a thing. So add in a bit more leaking. Let me see what's going on here. Just going to raise up the brush. I think the brush was too small. No, I'm on. Sorry, yeah, I was on the eraser tool. So there we go now. And let me see, size, flow. That's coming out crazy. So that's not good. So let me see. I'll drop that size down again, really small. And it's still a bit much. Let me just get some more. I won't go all the way around here. You get the idea here with the particle brush. So might even add some maybe some here. You can see there the way it just goes off the side of the geometry there, and you know, we could add some under these screws. Just where it would have rusted and the rain would have just oxidized or whatever would have interacted with the metal oxidization or whatever, and just rusted up, or something along those lines. Now you could come in also and you know, just go along these. You know, there's another brush here, leaks. This is heavy leaking. So you could even go across the top of the screws or the rivets, and you can see that's a nice effect there where it slides down. And if you're wondering here, if you see this kind of thing from where we masked, another thing I forgot to mention was the mask. Which one was it? This one here, color selection. If you see this tolerance here, you can raise that up, and it's not really affecting that, but what it's going to do is, you saw in the ID mask there, if I go to pick color, these weird lines here between the UV borders, they're going to, the tolerance there just helps to spread it out to kind of the very edge of the UV, so there's not some missed pixels. So back to the leaks layer, and I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to add in some more stuff like this, and I'll come back then. Right, it's a bit more leaking added in there, and you know, we can you could set that to multiply or whatever, different blend modes. I could just drop down the opacity down. So what we're going to do now is add in a stencil here. So stencil is stencil selected. You want to select the stencil tool, and you'll have your stencil selected. Here's color, and you can put on metal roughness or height or any of them. I'm just going to put color on, but you can add on these other channels if you want, but I'm just going to leave it at color for the moment. And you can see here it looks all blurry, but it actually isn't. So I'm going to snap the viewport holding shift and zoom in a bit, and then if you press S is the key for manipulating your stencil, and then Alt is the usual. You can see your mesh in the background. You can manipulate it. Sorry, we can manipulate that as usual in the background, and then just use S to move these in and out. So I'm just going to select one that I want here. So I'll probably put this one here, or maybe yeah, I'll put this one here. We clicked over here to activate our stencil brush, and then we're just going to paint in that stencil. And you can just check that, turn it off, and just make sure you want to just line up your viewport so that it doesn't stretch. The texture doesn't stretch. You can see there I've turned off the roughness. Now this seems to be on the leaks layer, so I meant to add that in as its own layer. So it doesn't really matter, but it would have I should have added that on its own layer, but it doesn't really matter now. But you know, you'd want to do that really, you know, and I would do it normally for a project, but just for the purpose of this, I'll just leave it there as it is. Now I might want to paint some roughness, into that. So I'll just go back to bring up the brush size and turn off color, and I just want to paint some some roughness back into that. It was too shiny. And then also I can just select one of these dirt brushes and maybe add some back in, just with a broken up sort of a specularity or reflection. And then also I'm going to add a white mask, and I'm going to grab me what have we got here? We have a chip brush still active here, so I can just come along and chip some of this away. You don't have to chip it all away, you can just kind of leave bits, and you know, you can take a bit out of the middle here and there, leave some edges okay, and then just give it a pass maybe of something like that storm cloud or your dirt brush, mold even here, and just give it a couple of, you can even just a couple of clicks here and there just to sort of dirty it up a bit so it doesn't look so pristine. And let me see, I'll activate the stencil brush again and go back to our layer, and maybe just put some little signs here on the box. So I'll just hold shift snap to view, and then I don't know, sorry, I want to go back to base color, and that seems to have disappeared. Brush base color, I'll just drag this back in here, and let me see, I'll leave that there, and S, and I might just put let me see, just trying to see what I want to choose. Maybe this danger, yeah, maybe this one here. I can see there that other one's coming in, but I can just paint that out in a second with the mask. And what else? Maybe, you know, you don't want to overdo it with these stencils either. Maybe this little small one, or maybe you could put this red and white band along the bottom here. Just stretch it up a bit. Maybe just paint that across the bottom, and snap the view around, move it into place, and I'll just make sure it's kind of lined up. Just paint that. I could have turned on, I forgot to mention earlier on, there's a symmetry up here, this X, or the symmetry, so I could have turned on symmetry there, but it's no big deal. Right, so we're lined up there, and I'll just press S, sorry, just press S and left just to rotate it a bit, and you see it's stretched around the corner there. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, sorry, zoom out a bit, and S, and just rotate it, and then middle to move it, and right to zoom it up. I'm going to paint over this again with the mask, but it's just to give you just to give you an idea. So I'll just press 1 to go back to brush. You can see here, like it's not lining up. It's stretched around the corners there. You can spend more time kind of fixing that up, but I'm probably just going to go back to our mask layer here, and I'm just going to paint this out here. And if I go back to brush, I can I don't know why that's happening with the brush. Oh yeah, because we're on the mask there. I'll just paint this out manually. It's no big deal. And I'll just going to choose maybe this mold brush and just sort of paint that bit out there at the corner, you know, where it covers up sort of that the mistake there, or it's the stretching, and also kind of just dirty this all up a bit, and then I can use the hard kind of chip brush there to where was it? Default, and I'll choose the chip brush, and I probably have to set some of these up again. Just go back from basic. Yeah, I have to set some of these up again, so we'll just that's why you could save as your preset. I'll leave the flow jitter and put the angle jitter up, and chip some of this away. Make it a bit bigger. And yeah, so maybe chip some of this off as well. So I think you know, you get the idea there. I also might want to you know, if I had have put this on a separate layer, we could have changed the you know, changed the blending modes and played around with the levels and everything, but it's no big deal. I'll leave that on normal, and sorry, I'm getting late. I'm just gonna, don't like the way that's kind of looks a bit crappy. Yeah, so you know, I think we can probably leave it at that here for this video. I'll probably make more in the future, but you know, you could add rust in here as well, or just to show really quickly what else you could do. Probably actually it's a bit too bright, this. Sorry, I go back to the mask. And if I can't help myself, I'm going to just gonna add a couple of little bits and buttons, or a few. I just have to add a few more in here. So I'll come back to the stencil and down to stencil. And let me see, what one do I want to add in? Maybe this caution. I'll just S. I'm just going to make it really small. And bring the brush down back to default. And just make that small, and then S. I could even just paint these in here. And maybe S, and maybe that biohazard one. Or yeah, it's a bit difficult to see there, but I'll start painting and we'll be able to see. No, that's badly spaced, so I'll just move that over. Or maybe I'll put it down here. I just want to line up the view there. And unfortunately there's no, maybe it'll be out in the future, there's no edge masking like Mari has. So just be careful not to go too close to the edges. So S, And which one we're going to put on there? Radioactive. And I don't want it there. Just want it over here a bit. And I might as well put this over here. Yeah, that's that'll do me. And maybe no, that's it. That's enough. And back to the mask. Let's paint some of these out. I'll just select the default brush and just paint these out. Sorry. And default brush. Just where these bits got added in. I don't know what that is. Doesn't seem to be. It won't allow me to. I'll just go to the eraser. I don't know why that wasn't working for me there. Wouldn't allow me to paint it out off the mask. Yeah, so that's. I'll just grab the dirt and then go down to the mold and a bit too much. Yeah, so that's going to do it there now. I'll leave it at that. And this video is pretty long, but I think I've covered a fair bit in it and given you a good idea of the workflow and some of the different techniques you can use. And I hope you enjoyed this painter part. I know I'm enjoying using the software. It's great software to use. So the last part of this now, this part 7. So yeah, part 8, I'll probably will export this from Painter and bring it into Unity. Unity 5 now has PBR in it, so we'll probably, and I think this global, like a real-time global illumination kind of a setup in it now. So we might stick this into Unity and just light it there and have a look at how it looks over there. So hope you enjoyed this part. I hope it wasn't too long, and I hope it was helpful. So I'll hopefully, that's a lot of hoping. See you in the next part. Alright then. Cheers, thanks, good luck.